Okay, so while this is loading, if you guys cannot hear me, I'll just give you a brief introduction about me. My name is Miriam Burnett, and I'm a graduate student researcher from the University of California, Santa Barbara. I am representing the Center for Black Studies Research. Looks like it's just popped up. Um, and today we're going to talk about some race relations and some issues as far as how we can deconstruct silos so that we can integrate things like ethnic studies and also STEM education. So I think share. Okay, here we go. Sharing. Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. Okay, someone's coming in. As people come in, would you be able to admit them for me if I don't see them? Okay, thank you. Okay, so for today, we're going to go ahead and introduce this project. Also, we're going to have conversations about maybe some experiences you may have in STEM, in education to create safer classrooms and benefits for intercultural competencies in STEM education, particularly for 21st century careers. We're going to talk about what employability is and what we can do to create more employable curriculums, possibly to be diversify the 21st century career paths in STEM. We're going to also go over some survey responses from my research that are really juicy. This may be firsthand experience where you will see STEM majors talking about things surrounding race, intercultural competencies, immigration, intersectionality. They talked about it all. So, and we're also going to talk about maybe some plans for implementation in your classroom and professional learning community. So a little bit about me before I jump in. This is me and my son Hunter. On the side, I'm a mother, daughter, sister, and a Black American. I do identify as a scholar activist. I'm originally from Compton, California, and I started this personal experience my first day in general chemistry when the teacher said, "Okay, we're gonna skip to chapter 5 in our Gen Chem books," and I was like slapped in the face because I came from a marginalized community where my high school class, I'm not ashamed to say that we really didn't cover the bases to be at a University of California, Santa Barbara. So I began to self-reflect and I learned more through my Center for Black Studies research to give me the self-efficacy that I needed to continue on in my scholarly work. I later became a distinguished star student through the UC Cal Teacher Initiative, where I thought I was going to be a teacher for a while, but then I got interested in the research aspect. So now I'm a GSR and I really support mixed method strategies to enhance cultural and educational experiences and higher STEM education, again, to empower self and create more self efficacy to create non binary STEM identities. So we're going to break the ice just a little bit and just create this little scenario. So here we're gonna just think of it. We're all at the shopping mall. Well, this couple is. So this cartoon couple is at the shopping mall, and they're with their children. We see here. Let's gonna just imagine this is a white couple, and in this scenario, they see a man shopping, and the kid says, "Hey, mommy. Hey, daddy. That's a black guy." And the response from the mom and daddy was to immediately shush this person. The black guy looks over and clearly looks to see, okay, what is your response going to be? We see things like this all the time happen. We know that race is still something that a lot of us don't want to talk about or either can't talk about because we don't have the proper information. Then it starts to get into questions about morality versus, okay, should I talk about it or can I talk about it? So we want to um, really think about as we educate our children how to really understand how to answer these questions that they may have about differences in race, sexual identity, these types of things like this. Also thinking about how to distinguish between, we think about things like classism. Um, is it going to be a different response between if the black man maybe is dressed professionally versus if he's not dressed professionally? Would the response be the same? Yes or no? Possibly. And we'll see sometimes that usually it's not. Even when we think about interracial couples, that response may have been different for the children if they may have been in a store and seen an interracial couple. What would the parents' response have been? Usually we see that the responses usually will not be a response if you do not have cultural competencies in order to answer these types of questions. So as we move on, we want to think about how do we create opportunities so that when children are or when people in general see these types of things, how do we answer it if we don't understand how to answer it? So we have to figure out how do we educate ourselves so that we don't ignore it because we see that there are differences, but we need to understand how to have the competence to do that. Um, so with this introduction, I would like to start off by saying science, we see that racism is inextricably linked to science as an institution and privileged area of knowledge construction. This is nothing new. And that inquiry based instructional application without culturally relevant pedagogy may not be sufficient enough to support diverse students in science learning. So, as we move forward, we want to know how to answer questions when kids or people in general ask questions um, that need this culturally relevant pedagogy in order to really stop perpetuating inequalities, injustices, discrimination, prejudices, all those types of things that's going to create hardships in the workforce. So our project's goal in this was to research ways to seek supporting changes the way STEM programs and institutions of higher education are actively promoting STEM education to students interested in the work of social justice. So particularly we're looking at STEM education and what are they doing to make sure that students that are leaving STEM are not perpetuating injustices, but are actually deconstructing and also aiding in the fight for social justice because we see that usually STEM students are not in that fight, and it's usually um, humanities, social science, arts majors, those types of things, uh, those types of majors who are going out and have more interest in social justice work. So we want to aim to help teachers think about how to support students, particularly those interested in STEM, in developing an identity to promote self efficacy to persist in college and career pathways, and how to support students, again, particularly while teaching STEM content, and how to understand and examine how activism and social movements can rectify inequalities in STEM education and career pathways. So, overall, we as educators we should shoot to try and create safer classrooms. So in a safe classroom, students are taking risks, they're asking questions, classroom discourse is encouraged and respected. Different solution methods and different ways of thinking are valued and viewed as opportunities for learning, and collaboration is also valued. We see that reducing fear and stereotyping helps create a safer classroom and environment for students and creates a classroom mindset for equity that can also extend beyond the classroom. So I say this and I really promote this in the research because as a STEM student, science teachers are always our STEM teachers are seem to be the most standoffish when we do our surveys. They're the more scary ones. They're people are not the students are not more inclined to ask questions because especially if they don't see the representation of themselves in the classroom as far as other students or the teacher or in the coursework. So just trying to create a safer classroom as we move forward is definitely very key to even beginning this work. So just want to stop to consider some questions. Um, so what conversations can you or have you had that will help you create safer classrooms for students traditionally marginalized from STEM education? How have you adjusted and how can you adjust the template materials from your own instruction? And also, what more do you want to do before you can feel comfortable to assist changing the perceptions of STEM identity culture in your classrooms? So we're just gonna go in breakout rooms. You can randomly do this for me, please. And it's gonna talk about this for about 5 minutes. Just open your mind up to the next part of what we're gonna do here. Then we're gonna look at some survey responses from students and how they felt about placing ethnic studies and their perceptions of STEM together. So can you go ahead and manage the breakout rooms for me, please, for 5 minutes or so?
Yeah.
We're having some good conversations in here, and I'm sorry if some of you have gotten cut off. Would anyone like to share or reflect on anything they were talking about in their breakout rooms? If so, just go ahead and unmute yourself. I always do the 5 second Zoom time before I go. Okay, great. So what we got from my group was just that right now it's very necessary to have these types of conversations around STEM and STEAM, but there also is a challenge that is presented, especially in terms of equity and getting students to realize the importance of STEM majors to involve themselves in these types of social justice and work to deconstruct these injustices that we see in a lot of institutions. So moving forward, we're going to talk about how to prepare these students for the 21st century and why we really focus on ES pedagogy for STEM students. So right now we focus on it because these graduates are the guarantors of the country's economic success, excuse me, and social welfare. We see that they have the highest paying jobs, they're very influential over things like healthcare, civic engineering, the water we drink. There's all types of things that we can think of that why they need to be involved and understand ES pedagogy and other frames of diversifying their minds to deconstruct what we see today that has been perpetuated for a while. So we have a call of duty, and we want educators, we expect them to to train their students to be prepared with workforce skills of tomorrow, to be inclusive in diverse industries and domains, because traditionally instructional program measures perpetuate the curriculum in such a way that is at the cost of neglecting the knowledge and skills necessary for today's job market and the future. And we're going to see what those necessary skills later on are and what have they been lacking. So being knowledgeable in ethnic studies will enhance your rapport with students and professional options by, so these are the objectives that we hope um, teachers get and perpetuate in their classroom. We want them to enhance your skill base, and we want them to enhance student skill base and career potential, specifically as they move into diverse workforces. And especially with globalization, with the pandemic, we see that we work with all types of people everywhere because we can use the computer. So we need to challenge them to think more complex ways about identity and history to avoid cultural stereotyping and, disrespecting people, even if it's unconsciously, it happens, We want to strengthen your understanding of diversity, equity, and justice, which may provide a competitive advantage for future employment for both you and the student. And finally, we want to prepare you for a more globalized world again. So, with our research here through the Center for Black Studies and Exito, was what 21st century skills emerged through STEM students' perceptions of their of their ethnic feminine studies undergraduate course experiences that can be identified as competencies noteworthy for workforce preparation. So, just a little background about employability skills. So, what are they? So, they're a set of achievement skills, understandings, and personal attributes that are essential for business competitiveness, prosperity, and fairness, which are often underestimated and undertrained in educational institutions, and more specifically in science, technology, engineering, and math education. So, what are the 21st century skills? So, what we see here is that they really cluster in four different areas: critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication. These are the original four C's that were ushered in through initiatives that many educators underemphasize. Again, compassion, connection, courage that we now know employees are employers are looking for. Excuse me. So in our work, as we identified these four original C's, excuse me, excuse me. We're looking at this contemporary framework. Some of you may have seen in the initiatives for the 21st century. It is called the P21st Century Framework. And so I arrow life and career skills here because this is the area that we see that is most affected. So in this, we see 21st century skills developed are defined and illustrated as skills, knowledge, and expertise and support systems. I'm sorry, excuse me 1 second. Sorry, my son is heading out the door. Oh, excuse me. So they're developed to define and illustrate the skills, knowledge, expertise, and support systems that support the need to succeed in work, life, and citizenship. So if in a sense we want them to think about information past the technical uses that we particularly see when we're teaching STEM students, it's all about these technical skills and one plus one and like what is this theory and this and that. But we see that it's lacking, like when they get outside of the classroom, that this initiative is lacking ways to understand how to build life and career skills. So we collapsed this framework, which was the P21, with also the ethnic studies pedagogy framework, to consider the art of teaching and learning ethnic studies to cultivate soft skills and aid students in understanding structural forms of racism and sexism, thus building their critical consciousness and their critical thinking. So again, we see that by by using ethnic studies, we've seen that students, STEM students that you will see later in our research, their perceptions of ethics, actions, and accountabilities and emotional and cultural intelligence, especially as it pertains to empathy, it really grew out of this understanding of structural forms of racism and sexism, and that they actually exist. So we really took this to understand. We have to embed this with Christine Sleater and Zavala hallmarks of ethnic studies. I'm not going to go through them all, but what we really wanted to target was pedagogy that is culturally responsive and mediated, which draws upon students' lived experiences and social, cultural, and environments to intentionally design new learning spaces. So quickly, doing a little bit of literature review, we understood that soft skills is something that STEM students are lacking and that they need. So what are they and what are their importance? So we looked at a trust study by Prince and that recently surveyed teachers, parents, and pupils, and we asked them to talk about, they were asked to talk about the soft skills, the place of them in education. We've seen that 40% of the young people don't feel prepared to enter the workforce, with 43% of those who feel this way believing their soft skills are not good enough. More than a quarter of teachers, we see that 27% think that their students don't have all the soft skills required to do well after school, and that 72% of workers felt that they didn't have all of the soft skills to do well in their role when they started working. So these findings, again, they're not nothing new. Anything new, we've seen and we heard the notions that STEM students, they don't know how to socialize and that they don't have the soft skills. So again, we want to eliminate this and try and deconstruct this notion. So we want to, by doing this, we can maximize an interdisciplinary approach. I kind of use this picture when I'm like talking to my mentees initially in my Seeds program, which is students engaging, enriching in data science, where we take a uh, a group of students. It didn't matter what major they were from. They were from all different majors. And instead of containering them, we bust out the silos and we let them have conversations that merge STEM with humanities and arts. And what we got was a cluster of good data information that we can really use to see and understand how, again, to integrate STEM with other courses that particularly we see only arts, humanities, social sciences majors really take. So what we did here, we had took a survey of 1100 over 1100 students, and particularly we just looked at the 412 STEM students. And again, I'm going to move past this a little bit fast. If I am, you can just put it in the chat like slow down. It's just a lot of information. I want to get to more teacher implications. And I want you guys to hear some of the surveys. So after taking the 412 STEM majors, um, we actually got that information with a Qualtrics survey that we gave to them in their ethnic and feminine studies courses in 2020. We asked them questions like, did this course expose you to new information or material? Did this course help you understand societal issues, social problems? Did this course lead to shifting your ideas about societal issues and social problems? And do you wish you had learned this information prior to attending college? So from here, we can see some of the voices of the students, and I'll read a few of them. So a fourth year biochemistry student expresses his viewpoint on the matter. I think there is much to learn from the past. Learning the historical backgrounds of the US actions and prejudices can help us learn to better understand each other. Another student who wished not to be identified, she says, yes, I was exposed to an array of information about women's rights and the conditions of other disadvantaged populations through this course. This includes the cruel violation of body rights for BIPOC women in history. Another student I really liked his. He says he was an aquatic biology major. She identified as both Asian and white. Share her take on this course experience. She says this course gave me a stronger background in the feminist movement and how to be more conscious of my words and decisions to treat everyone with equality. Following that, there was a similar response from a physics major saying, I had not previously looked at social issues and specific groups of people so closely before, and this course gave me insight to it. We'll read a few more. Another student said, I believe learning about different cultures before you enter such a diverse place like college will help others see that we all don't come from the same culture and background, and will also teach others where traditions are based on so there won't be any type of disrespect leading to minimalization and cultural appropriation. And lastly, one student said, before this course, I never fully comprehended. And this one's particularly very interesting because we are also seeing that with these diversity courses and generally have a greater impact on white students' racial attitudes than on those students of color. This student said, particularly before this course, I never comprehended how privileged I am. As a white man was in this country, so many of the positions and privilege I have gained are due much in part to my race and are not luxuries afforded to the majorities of the population. We did a series of coding and we looked at these skills because we see that employability skills are indicative to these, which are they want STEM students we want them to really critically think, but we want them to collaborate more. We didn't see too much collaboration, but we did see that a lot of students did were coded for global and multicultural literacy and civic and social justice literacies. They gained some type of emotional intelligence. Some of them took different self directions and initiatives after getting the information that they acquired. And the most significant of our findings was cultural competence. Out of 412 STEM students, 393 of them were identified as gaining, strengthening, or developing some type of cultural competence. So this is pretty huge finding. So why should we change? Um, Civil engineers can potentially create or exacerbate these inequalities in the health and well-being of communities through infrastructure projects, such as determining where a freeway, a dam, an oil pipeline, or airport will be built. Computer scientists and mathematicians have the expertise to critically examine algorithms used in a wide variety of industries for hidden biases, resulting in sometimes unintentionally inequitable decisions that have significant consequences. So we need to understand that students need to have some type, especially STEM students, need to have some type of moral compass, and they really get this from understanding what they're understanding and moving forward with the knowledge that they gain from ethnic studies, feminine studies, those types of coursework. So our cycle of inquiry, we ask, how can we facilitate a safe classroom for students, particularly women, disabled, and students of color in our classrooms while teaching STEM subject disciplines? If teachers cannot provide a separate space for those who have been historically and systematically disenfranchised. So we want to really push also the initiative that students just don't need to have this information. A lot of the STEM teachers, in particularly being white men, they don't have the information that they need. We did another survey that's not provided here, but they didn't see the need to put in a lot of curriculum indicative to social justice. It was just like STEM and STEM. There shouldn't be a border that should be crossed. But when we surveyed those students in their classroom, the students are really calling out. They really want to see themselves represented more. They want to see climate, cultural climate, classroom climate in their classrooms. They want to see that in STEM. So we see that the instructors and the students have two different perceptions of what they actually want or what they actually feel is necessary in STEM. So if you don't know cultural competence, it is really defined as the abilities of individuals and systems to work or respond effectively across cultures in a way that acknowledges and respects the culture of the person or organizations being served. We use ethnic studies because ethnic studies is really an anti-racist project. It's more than just a class. It's a project that really encourages both teachers and students to critique racial oppressions at the institutional, interpersonal, and internalized levels, while also showing how each level influences each other. So in this little scribble bubble, when we first initially did our mind map, we figured that this little overlapping area is really the intercultural competence of all these three areas again: the institutional, interpersonal, and internalized levels. When we have these identities that we all are in, we have to understand that what I see might be different from what someone else sees. And if we work together and I don't understand how you see this situation, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be further disrespect. There's going to be further perpetuating institutionalized racism and STEM, and just we need to just figure out how to hone in and just eliminate this. And we feel like we can do it through an intercultural competence by gaining understanding of one another. Wrapping up for our next conversation, our project really assumes that it's important for all students to develop an intercultural competence, and that teachers must serve to guide students' development of intercultural competencies within STEM and present tools to build self efficacy to ensure more women, disabled, and students of color persist onward towards successful STEM higher education and career paths. The projects focus on developing self efficacy to resist and persist. We really see that for the non privileged. So that's another thing we look at in our research and our literature review. Who is considered privileged in STEM? And so for those students that are considered privileged in STEM, they really did not associate them with marginalized communities or, again, women, disabled, students of color. It was really white or Asian Pacific Islanders, and they were considered as a privilege. And so they have another focus, and we will hope that they help address inequalities in STEM. From a privileged perspective, you have also a responsibility as pointing out things that you know aren't right because you have the knowledge now through classes. And what can you see when you're in this area? Because STEM, I think of it as a fraternity. I really don't see, as a woman of color, people who look like me, especially in physics. It's very white male dominating. And so if you have and you are the privilege in this area, you have a responsibility to make sure that you address inequalities from a different perspective. So we consider what are again the objectives for those who are non-privileged, and what do they get out of it, and what are those for those who are privileged in the differences. But we are all working on again deconstructing silos and making tools more present to again ensure more women and disabled and students of color, we can really see more of them in STEM. So intercultural competence and STEM, and we want to see safer classrooms. We want to see students engaging in cognitively demanding work while also attending to concepts that aim to bring social justice and institutional changes. We are looking to advance STEM learning through rich language and literacy exposure and growth of intercultural perspectives. It's just not one perspective, it's many perspectives as we move towards diversifying the workforce. And again, we like to leverage students' tons of knowledge because everyone looks at things differently from different cultures, from different ethnicities, from different races, different backgrounds. So, understanding the challenges of how to leverage that into creating a safe space for everyone to really involve themselves in scientific concepts that really bring again social justice and forth institutional changes. I'm not going to go through all of this, but we see that this is happening at each level, the early childhood level. We see that if teachers are able to leverage this type of information, they bring forth positive racial attitudes that can be developed best by confronting children's actual assumptions about race and racism and differences they see among people. Like in the first ice-breaking example, like, oh, that man is black. Like, how how early do you think we should start challenging this? And we see that as early as possible. So pre and post test designs, we see by one particular study found that talks about race at this early childhood level reduces prejudices. It directs attention towards individual qualities rather than group membership, and also offers positive information about a group. I did read it all. I guess it was necessary. Moving on towards elementary levels, our research and our literature review, we looked at one particular that did a meta-analysis of 30 studies that compared the impact of traditional curriculum versus a multi-curriculum on racial attitudes in pre-K students in STEM. 21 of the 30 studies reported an effective size of 645. When we looked at that using R, we did compute it during using R and we tried to replicate it. It basically says that exposure of racial attitudes, like we've seen that at the early and secondary levels, when we gave them more information, it brought about more positive changes in students' attitudes, again, than did the exposure to traditional programs. So we see that we need to and we should move towards integrating a a multicultural curriculum. And lastly, in higher education, there is a tremendous opportunity for students to engage in the work of social justice through STEM. Research examines the impact of various diversity experiences with a focus on course taking and interracial interactions. So, again, this is a time where a lot of STEM students, because they're mandated to take ethnic studies or women's studies or general diversity requirements, this is one of the only times that STEM students are integrated in such a way that they can have roundtable discussions and interact with other students to really build their knowledge and understanding that will have positive impacts on them in the future. So we're going to just reflect real briefly. One more breakout room for about 5 minutes to reflect on the goal. When might you be able to integrate concepts of race, gender, culture, etc. in your STEM lessons? How might knowledge from diversity courses help you as teachers facilitate a safer classroom? And also, what challenges or adjustments do you anticipate in making these changes when teaching? So I'll go ahead and drop those in the chat. So, does anyone like to comment or reflect on any of the goals that we see on the screen?
Hi, Miriam. I'll go ahead and share something now. I think for that first question, when might you be able to integrate concepts of race, gender, culture, and STEM lessons? I do. Um, my perception is often for teachers, their answers to that is going to be heavily dependent on the course that they're teaching, or the context in which they're teaching. So my experience is high school math teachers, and for a lot of them, I can point to, I have a couple of books right over here. One of them is called Rethinking Mathematics, which looks at social justice infused lessons for mathematics, um, where we can, for example, um, look at a community, different communities, access to, let's say, healthy food stores, and use concepts of like density and whatnot. um, and I think there's a lot of different types of one-off lessons, but I would be interested to understand how I could help facilitate my teachers, knowing how to pull this in, when they're talking about let's say systems of linear equations, or whatnot, or sometimes whatever they're going through in their courses. So that's just something I want to put out there.
Thank you. I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I think one of the biggest challenges I see in this is that creating of a safe space, right? Because that takes a lot of energy, effort, time, groundwork, and capacity to build that safe space where you can have a conversation about race, gender, or culture. And I think that that's not necessarily a skill that a lot of teachers have. And so I think that that would be the biggest challenge, because it would change the entire classroom. It would change the entire, the way that a classroom is managed, the way the classroom is running. It might even be towards the school culture too, because you might have one classroom where the folks are, open to changing the way that they speak and the way they interact, but then you might have a school culture that is not. And so I think that that would be a big challenge going forward.
I would like to ask for some of you that have been experienced, because I am a new graduate student, and as I move, I see that there still are gatekeepers, and there still are people that are not, they don't really feel it's necessary to change and make those changes in STEM, as far as to push for social justice and equity and inclusion. Like with the notion of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Because again, we see that these this major in particularly are guarantors of social welfare, and they have like one highest economic mobility, as far when you get it. When I got to college, right, when they say what's your major, I felt like even that people wanted to give you a certain type of respect or a certain type of inclusion in this STEM culture. You have to earn that. And how do we kind of change this kind of perception in this culture that has never really been inclusive, again, for women, or diversity in general? And I would just go off the end and say that I just recently went to a ITEEA conference, where one of the groups that was there in particular, they had teachers like religious studies teachers and political science teachers involving themselves in a STEM program. So I feel like outside of the classroom, there might be ways and opportunities, because again, like one person just said, the classroom culture and the school culture are different. They might not align yet, but maybe through extracurricular clubs or activities, we can start to experimenting and finding ways to integrate between the humanities and the sciences, and that we can kind of create the change and say, hey, it's working for us after school, or it's working for us in this little program. Let's see if we can start to integrate it into more of a school structure. Because right now, I don't honestly see STEM feeling that it's necessary to really integrate issues about social justice or inequality into the curriculum. So how do we feel? How do you feel like as teachers we can go about as making it as necessary as possible to create this change that we want to see? If the culture is again feeling like if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah, I don't have the answer either. So moving forward, oh, go ahead. Yes, I see a hand raised.
I was just going to say, I think that part of it is the perspective of like whose job it is to engage students with ethnic studies. It's my job to teach math. It's my job to teach chemistry. It's not necessarily my job to do that work. And so I think that in changing the perspective of teachers and understanding that we're educating the whole child and that it is our job because we want to utilize these culturally responsive practices to make sure that nobody gets left behind. I think that that's going to be an important shift in the mentality of folks as they're going forward.
I agree. Because someone did say earlier the challenges is getting teachers and students to understand too, like, hey, when I'm doing math, they're losing interest when I say this is math, but we're going to deal with this issue about social justice and equity. They feel this is not, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm a STEM major. That's the humanities and social sciences job. So just figuring out the challenge overall is deconstructing the silos. That is one huge problem that we see is not working across campus departments. I know in higher education, it's like you're in your department, we're over here, you're over there, different requirements for everyone. It's just like a shuffle of everyone is everywhere and I stay in my lane. But in reality, if we have to understand how to integrate better in order to even make approachable changes to bring forth equity, because equity is a social justice issue that we need to understand how to deal with in STEM. But in order again to do that, how do we connect those that we need to understand that it's an issue, which is STEM, with those that understand the issue, which is the social sciences, the arts, those. And usually there's a person in the middle that I feel like is a gatekeeper that doesn't want us to really mesh. And I think publicly that's the institution that needs to help with through policies or whatever to try and like get people to understand like we all, like you said, have a responsibility to make sure that this student is getting everything that they need, the soft skills and the technical skills, the cultural skills, everything that they need to order to be successful. And as we move towards, globalization, diversifying the workforce. Ending, I would like to say that we feel that it really begins with empathy. I know that the last session talked a little bit about empathizing. We need to empathize with one another, and we experience one-on-one in our most immediate relationships and builds on from there. Like as a teacher or as a mentor, like you can start from there and then develop friendships and move on to small groups, teams, cohorts, classes, networks. But we have to start somewhere, like be fearless, because it's going to take someone who is kind of fearless too, because the institution does not want to see the change. I can say that as a Black woman in STEM, I felt many times that I'm in an institution that does not want to see more diversity. It's very fraternal in a sense. So we have to start somewhere, but we need to get to where we need to get, which is impacting the institution. And we do that with strength in numbers. And so again, thank you, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Again, this material is based upon our work supported by the Exito program, and any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this material are mine and do not really necessarily reflect Exito. And so again, thank you for listening to my research, and I hope you have a good day. Any questions or comments? No. Okay. Thank you.